Well, hi everybody, or whatever. My name's Penny, and I've been a Bahai in Preston, probably one of the longest Bahais in Preston. I came from Manchester, where my parents sort of were Bahais. I encountered the faith when I was 9, you don't become a Bahai till you're 21. So obviously I declared as a Bahai sort of when I was sort of 21 in Manchester, and then I sort of came to Preston. I trained as a nurse and took my career path down the counselling route, etc. And eventually sort of trained as a family mediator, which is what I actually do in Preston at this present moment of time. I met my husband Malcolm in Manchester, where I was nursing at Salford Royal Hospital, and he came there as a senior house officer, and
I was a Christian at the time.
Yes, yeah, and we met. It took some years for.
We had a Bahai wedding.
Yes, yes, that's very important in our. It's very important in our faith to have a Bahai wedding, and really what that means is that in our faith, your parents have to consent to your choice of sort of partner, both sets, and natural parents, which, as a family mediator, I'm realising now has a really big impact why it needs to be natural parents, because so many people, because of adoption, etc., are now encountering the fact that they've met their brother, or they've met their sister, or they've met a relative and fallen in love, and maybe that's not, you know, so it's understandable why our faith should have said natural parents rather than adoptive parents. Or and
so we got married in 1974.
Yes, we did.
You were living at home. We lived at home at the time, and that was in Eccles, Manchester. So we had a Christian wedding in the Eccles Parish Church, and we had a Bahai wedding in Penny's parents' garden.
Yes.
And
we don't have places of worship. We meet in people's homes.
It's a bit like the early Christians. The faith is the youngest of the world religions, and so we're still small on the ground, especially in this country and these parts of the country in particular. Yeah. In Preston, the first Bahai in Preston was Alan Woodhurst, and he and his wife lived in Fulwood over at Kilworth Heights, and Alan and his wife came from Upminster in Essex to Preston in 1973 or 4, so that Alan could further his studies at the then Polytechnic of Preston. And Alan investigated the faith and fell in love with the writings of Baha'u'llah and accepted his claims. And so he wrote to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the UK, and they accepted his declaration of faith, and so he became the first Bahai in Preston. And he was quickly joined by Christine and Jim Elliott.
No, he was joined by me.
And Kamran Naderi.
Yeah.
There was a map of the Preston Baha'is at the time, and it's just got their names on. And then, like I say, we came to Preston in 1977, I think it was, and joined the then Baha'is. And by 1978, we were ready. I say we, I wasn't a Bahai at the time. Penny was on the first local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Preston, which formed in April 1978, and there's a picture in the Lancashire Evening Post of that. And
I think your timescale's just slightly wrong there, and I don't know. I don't know what to do there, but anyway, when I arrived, Alan was here, and as you're right, he got in touch with the NSA because there were no Baha'is in Preston at the time. And then when I arrived, I was introduced to Alan. His wife actually became a lay preacher, and they're now over in sort of South Africa because of her sort of mission of work. I met Alan, and it was such a sort of funny encounter because I'd arrived with sort of 2 little children, and Alan sort of came to see me, and he just said, "Here you are." I said, "Here's a pile of leaflets, and I'd like you to just sort of distribute them." So he gave me 1,000 leaflets. So there I was with my little sort of girl in the sort of pram, pushing this pram round sort of Preston, leafleting sort of the area. But very rapidly sort of after I arrived, another couple sort of came. They lived in back of Booths in Preston, Jim and Christine, and then following on from that, a doctor and his wife came from, I think she was from Wales and he was from sort of Iraq, and they arrived and lived at Whittingham Hospital. He was doing psychiatry there. So it was, you know, we came from sort of quite diverse backgrounds into Preston, and as Malcolm said, sort of formed the sort of first assembly. When there are 9 Baha'is in an area, then you form what's known as a local spiritual assembly. And
if there's more than 9, then you have an election every Rizvan. Today is the 12th day of Rizvan, and these 12 days are, 3 of them are designated holy days, and it's the most great festival for Baha'is, and it marks the time in the history of the faith when Baha'u'llah, who had been exiled from his native Iran and was in Baghdad at the time, was further exiled up to Constantinople. But before he left, he pitched his tents just by the river in the Garden of Rizvan, and during that time he gave intimation to some early believers of who he was, his station as a messenger of God. And then after the 12 days today, the tents were taken down and the exile began, and it was a very arduous exile right up to Constantinople. Great sufferings were yet to face him. And so we mark that. The first day of Rizvan is the time when we have our local and national elections. We've just come back from National Convention last weekend,
which was held at Park Hall,
where the 95 delegates meet from all around the UK, and then they elect the new incoming National Assembly. And our delegate from Lancashire was one of those, Sohar Spicer, who lives in Halsall. And so 86 delegates were there out of 95 and voted, and and the others gave postal votes. So it was remarkable, our Baha'i elections, because there's no canvassing, no electioneering. It's just a prayerful atmosphere, and you can vote for anyone you like in the country who's a approved believer and adult believer. So
one of the things we love about, one of the things I love about my faith is, and from being a young child, is that it brings together all of the sort of religions. We have sort of Baha'is who've come from Muslim backgrounds, Christian backgrounds. I myself come from a sort of Catholic background. Malcolm comes from a sort of Baptist background, and we have a member in Preston who came from the Swedenborg Church. So it was lovely, you know, it's lovely to see sometimes faith in action. Whilst we've been in sort of Preston, obviously there was there's been the atrocities of Iran, and it was very heartening to have sort of Dr. Sabor, who's now passed and is buried in sort of Preston. He was from sort of Iraq, and then we have actually sort of Shaheen, who's from Iran, and for them to be able to sit in the same room and pray together during a time when their countries are at war was really quite fascinating in its own way, and to see just how people can actually come together, and not not put sort of colour, race, religion. I myself sort of come from an Asian background. My parents are Indian, so though I may look white, I'm not. I'm the pale face of the family, if you will.
Sure. Is there a Baha'i blessing you could give the people of Preston in this Guild year? Is there something, a prayer or something that you would offer?
One that comes to mind. God, Baha'u'llah uttered the words, "God grant that the light of unity may envelop the whole world, and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its peoples." Unity is fundamental to the Baha'i faith. The unity of God, that there's only one God. The unity of religions, because all the messengers are sent by the one God to progress mankind. And the unity of mankind itself, that all the diverse races and cultures and creeds and sexes all should let go of their prejudices and recognise the oneness of humankind, because only when we put the horse before the cart, the unity first, the love, will we start to solve the world's problems, which can only be solved by spiritual means. If you take the economic crisis, for instance, we have to solve it by attention to virtues, thrift and greed, and which is a lack of virtue, obviously. And by looking into the spiritual principles, we believe the problems of the world can be solved, whether it be environmental, educational, consumeristic, or whatever.
But when you're looking at unity, I mean, you know, we're not looking for sort of cloning. I mean, we're looking for unity and diversity, and as Baha'is, sort of, we work tirelessly, really, to be involved with the community, to try and help the community. I work as a family mediator, sort of, obviously through various sort of professions. A lot of Baha'is have sort of taken up sort of peace studies and things, and we were involved in Preston. The bringing together
during International
of the
Youth Year,
the Peace
Baha'is produced a record called Peace Moves.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, yes, yeah.
That was played on Radio Lancashire.
But that was also at the sort of time of the sort of Peace Garden, and there is a Peace Garden in Preston.
Yeah. And the Universal House of Justice, which is the central governing body of the faith, which is based in Haifa, produced a document in 1983 called The Promise of World Peace, and we were involved very much in taking this to all the civic and religious leaders of the world, but we did our part in Preston locally, taking it to mayors and leaders of all sections of society. And we've also had similar contact. This message was sent to the world's religious leaders by the Universal House of Justice, and again we distributed this to the religious leaders locally. So we've been trying, as Penny says, very hard to promote interfaith harmony, because we believe so deeply in the oneness of the religions. We don't have any anxieties over worshipping with other religions, we don't have to knock their prophets to make ours seem good, because we believe they're all spiritual educators in the one school.
So from us, we would like to...
So from us, we'd like to offer one of Baha'u'llah's sayings, which is in the form of a blessing, or an imprecation, really. He said, "God grant that the light of unity may envelop the peoples of the whole world, and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its peoples."